I was actually born in Mile End Hospital, that's in the East End of London, on the 24th of September, on a Wednesday. We actually lived in Loxley Street, which is more Limehouse, and we lived there until I was 7. And I have a brother who's 14 months younger than myself. My mum was Maud Rumley, my dad Rupert Rumley, but known as Bob or Dick. It was my grandmother's house, or my grandfather's, and it was a townhouse, 3 stories. Lived next door to my Uncle Bill, who was my dad's brother. He had 2 more brothers. One was Fred and one was Edwin. We went to school at Manners School, both my brother and I. This is where I met my friend Doreen. When the war broke out in 1939, we were both evacuated to, well, Doreen didn't go, she went with her mum and dad, but I went to Weston-super-Mare with the school, with my brother, with our labels in our little buttonholes on our coats, put on a train, waved goodbye to my mum and dad. When we arrived in Weston, we were all packed into a hall, all the evacuees, and then lots of mums and dads were there, and they come and they choose the ones they want. And my brother and I were the last 2 to be chosen. I was holding my brother's hand, and I was told before I went that I am to go with my brother. I'm not to go with anyone else. So we had to have someone that would take a boy and a girl, which we did have. Her name was Mrs. Poole. She had 2 children of her own, and 2 other children with us were evacuees. One was Joyce Beach. She was 14, and she was evacuated with the Abbey, which my husband then was obviously 4 years older than me. He was evacuated with her, but I didn't know him then. I'm not quite sure how many months we were there, and the bombing wasn't too bad at home, so we came home. We had an Anderson shelter in the garden, which you either had a Morrison, which was a sort of a table that you had in your dining room, or you went into the garden. It was built into the garden, and you went down about 4 little steps down into it, and there were 4 bunks in there, 2 either side. I was evacuated 4 times in all, and so another time I was evacuated to Lantrisant. Very nice people, elderly people, they're grandparents, and they wanted to adopt me. I wasn't evacuated in the house with my brother then. He was further along a lane somewhere else. Very nice people. Came from there and I went to Norwich. Wasn't there very long, but I went there on my own because I wanted to go again. My brother didn't. But I wasn't there very long. And then from then on, I was at home, back to Eastbury School. That's when the rocket, we had the doodlebugs used to come over, because I remember my dad, he worked in Bow at the time. He was fire watching, and he got thrown with the blast from one side to the other. So he had concussion. I think that happened to him a couple of times. And then after the doodlebugs, which was, they had a flame at the back, and sometimes they would turn and you would think that they could be coming towards you, but they would turn and go somewhere else. Then after that was the rocket. Now the rocket, you didn't know, you didn't hear a sound, so they couldn't put air raid warning, put the warning on, because they didn't know it was coming. And unfortunately, we did get hit with the rocket across the road, but we got the full blast of it, which happens sometimes. No casualties, that was good. But we didn't have a window left in the house, and the front door was at the back door, and it was in a terrible state. And we were sleeping downstairs with my mum at the time. With my brother, we were either side of my mum, because my dad thought it was safer, and he had the box room. And he got the full blast of the glass, and he got it all in his head and whatnot. And I remember him wandering down, that he came down the stairs in his singlet and pants, and he walked straight out. He said, "Is everyone right?" And he walked straight out the door. And the next thing, we didn't see him anymore, and a warden came to the door asking if everyone was all right, cups of tea and things, something to eat. And he said that my dad was picked up by an ambulance and taken to hospital, where he spent about 3 to 4 weeks there, in Upney Hospital, which was right at the bottom of the road. So my poor mum was left with the cleaning again. But as we were, my brother and I, 13 and 14, it's all sort of a, not fun really, but it's exciting. I was at school in Eastbury, and then the war ended, I think when I was 15. I went to work. Doreen and I got a job up in London where we were court dressmakers in Sallow Street. It's turning off of Oxford Street, where I served an apprenticeship for about 3.5 years, and I left there, and Doreen and I went to work in Titchfield Street. That was a good job, a nice lot of money there. My mother was called Maud. Before she had married, she was Maud Williams. She came from a family, I think originally around about 7 of them. She was the youngest. Her mother died when my mum was 17, and her brother died the year before. So it was quite sad around about that time. And Mum then took over the household duties. She had 2 brothers there and her sister Beatrice, a brother called Albert and a brother called Tom. Uncle Albert went to sea. He was a merchant seaman. I think he went to sea when he was about 17. My Aunt Beat got married. She had 2 boys. Her mother, I believe, was French. I don't know a Christian name, but I think her name was something like Decaux or something. She married a Churchill, Annie Churchill. When she met my dad, he was a butcher in Salmon's Lane in East End of London, butcher's assistant then. That was his trade. And Mum used to go and get meat for her mother. So that's when she first met him at a very young age. I think they got married when she was 20. My dad was 21. Just had the 2 of us. When we moved to Essex and we lived in Upney, Mum then started work, and she started first as a cleaner and then progressed up the ladder, eventually became the cook at Faircross School. Then she became supervisor, cook at the kitchen there, and right until she retired at the age of 60. My mum said that was the saddest day of her life. She didn't really want to give up work. My dad, he did several jobs. He was like a porter in a hospital. He was a trained butcher, a good butcher. I met my husband, Pete, when I was 16, and he was 20. I met him around about the July, and he was 21 in December the 1st. We had quite a long courtship because he wanted to get on in life. He actually joined the Fleet Air Arm when he was 17. He was really underage, and they sent him to Canada during the war, where he did his training, and he got his wings while he was in Canada, and he was about to be commissioned at a very young age. But the war ended, so he didn't get that. So he came home and he went into insurance in London. Didn't like that very much. And then he went into the shipping company, P&O Shipping Company, where he worked for a few years, I suppose. He was then nearly 26, and he decided that he would try and get into the RAF again, which he did. And he did all his exams in Hornchurch. He really studied hard. Came out really about 3rd in about 90. He did extremely well in both exams, only about the same. And he passed them all. And he'd already had his wings anyway. So he went into the RAF then when he was 20. So we were able to get married then because we had accommodation, nice accommodation with the RAF. So it was really, after all those years of sort of courtship, it was like a rush wedding because he came home, he said, let's get married now. So I got married on the 3rd of January. I got married at St Margaret's Church in Barking in 1952. And we had the reception over the top. It was known as the Rio then in Barking. We were the last to leave about 12 o'clock at night. We then caught the train, and Johnny Fleming, who Pete knew in Canada, was also a pilot at the time, and his wife, Jean. they came with us, and we stayed at the Russell Court Hotel in London, in Russell Square. Leaving in the morning to go down to Bournemouth, we were in Johnny's car, and when we put the cases in the car, we went and had a cup of coffee at the railway station there, and got back to the car, and somebody had broken into the car and stolen my case. We still carried on. We went down to Bournemouth. Yeah, it was lovely week down there, bright and cold, Boscombe down, the red squirrels all around your feet. We moved to Oxford in Botley Road, Cowley, I think it is. Pete got his commission, nice and central, right near the station, so I could walk into town. That was nice. Then after that, we were posted to Ripon, and we got a lovely house in Ripon down a very country lane with a chap called George Washington. And we had the floor up top. When Pete was away, I used to go down, because you used to say you like a game of cards, and I used to go down and play crib with him and cards with him. Nice man he was. We were there a few months, then I came home again. I was expecting my first child, Nikki. Nikki was born in Upney Hospital, which is just a quarter of an hour down the road. She weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces, something like that. Lovely baby. And then I think we went to Singapore. Nikki was 3 months old when I left, about 3.5 months old. So I boarded the ship. Doreen and Steve, Doreen's husband Steve, and my mum and dad and my brother all saw me off at Southampton. It was a month's trip out to Singapore. Lovely trip. My first time ever going on a ship, big ship like that. I used to carry the carry cot with Nikki up the steps, and she used to swing in a little hammock on the ship. Plenty of fresh air. She was as good as gold, good baby. Everybody used to stop and look at her. We docked in Singapore, and I left Nikki in the cabin, and I went up on deck. I looked down, and your dad was waving. He came up, and he thought I'd have the baby in my arms, but I said no. I've left her in there because it was very hot and sticky. Came down to the cabin and saw you for the first time, and the first words he said was, "Oh, she's much more lovelier than her picture." So that was nice. So then he picked you up the carry cart, and we went, and I waved goodbye. I saw my friend Dusty. Car Pete had just bought off of one of the chaps that was going back to the UK. I think it was a Vanguard. And then we went back to the Lamsoon Guest House, which we lived in for 6 months. It's in Changi, and you go in big gates. It's like a hotel thing. Quite a few of the RAF were living there. I think Andy was living on the same floor as us, and then there was the upstairs and there was downstairs, and then you walk out of there and you come to a big building which was the restaurant where we all used to eat. So yeah, I had a lovely time in Singapore, really great. Boat parties all the time. I was pregnant with my second daughter, Sally, and she was born in Changi Hospital about 10 o'clock in the morning. So we brought her home, and we left there when Sally was about 7 months old. Then we came home, went to live with my mum for a couple of months in Upney again. After that, we then moved to Rudloe Manor, which is near Box Village. We had a nice quarter there, a lovely view from my kitchen window. It was an old airman's Nissen hut, huge bath and everything, but really set out nicely. One just long room, passageway with rooms dropping off a bit. Lovely time there. And that's where my third daughter was born, Jackie. I had her at home. beautiful baby. My mum was with me. Pete took the two girls out for a walk. Nikki went to school there, down Leafy Lane. Nice little school. We then stationed to Lynham. We adopted a cat there called Timmy, but it turned out to be a she. She had kittens, so we piled the car up and we took the cat with the kittens with us, 3 kittens. So we had a lovely new house in Lynham. It was just been built. It was a lovely house. Lovely time there. Nice next door neighbours, Alice and Bob Reynolds. I was there for 5 years, where my son was born, and he was born at Broughton Hospital, John, and he was a big boy. He weighed 9'10". I think it was about 65, we decided that we'll buy our first house, because Pete then was thinking that he may be leaving the RAF. I had it in his mind, so we bought this house in Lechlade. When we moved into it, we had an extension done the year after to make it, because I then became pregnant again, where I had my son David, and he was born in Oxford. But so we needed an extra bedroom, so we had the extension built on with 2 more rooms, making it into a 5-bedroom house. My husband then, after a year, he went to Boscombe Down and did test flying. He liked that very much. And in fact, he would like to have done another year, but I said no, I couldn't, because he was only home every weekend, and I'd had David as a baby, and I said, no, it's not on. He was then back at Bryce, and then he decided then to leave the RAF. And to become a commercial pilot, you have to do another flying test to get the licence for that. So I think you had to pay for that, which cost about £1,000 at the time. So he then went to Oxford, did that, got that, then joined Monarch Airlines. They one of the first to join Monarch Airlines when it first started out, which it started out in the early 60s. He was there 16 years, and he became a training pilot by the time he left. It was a good life, really good life. But he died at the age of 56, just turned 56. Died of a heart attack on a tennis court. Jackie was the first one to get married. Then she married Brian Matthews, and they had 2 children, Emma and Christopher. She was married for about 4 or 5 years, could be more, but the marriage broke up, and eventually she married again when she was in her 30s, and she married Jeff Curtis, and they had a son called Andrew. Unfortunately, Jackie died when she was just 43. The next one to be married was Nikki. She married Robert Gregory, and they had 2 children, Katie and Paul. She then married Richard and went into the pub business where they had the Natterjack. And then they had this beautiful boy called Jamie. I spent quite a bit of time with Jamie when he was a little boy. Well, in fact, I spent quite a lot of time with Katie and Paul as well. But I used to go down there and help out a little bit. After Nikki, Sally got married. She was 22 when she got married. She married her school sweetheart, David, and they had 2 children, Peter and Joanna. Then John got married to Karen, and they had 3 children, Tom being the eldest, Natalie and Molly. Now, David got married to Frances They had 2 boys called Zach, and Lucas. So in total I have 13 grandchildren. I also have 12 great-grandchildren. All our family Christmases were fantastic. It was a house full. Every room was occupied. We had beds going everywhere, top and tail in and all sorts of things. Yeah, we had some great Christmas. Mum in the kitchen usually, keeping in charge of the cooking out there. We start Christmas Eve really and going down and get all my veg on Christmas morning. And then the children would arrive.
Tell me what you're doing, Nan.
What are you doing? What am I doing? I'm cooking the Christmas dinner.
Yes.
And one Christmas, remember very, very well, and that was the Christmas that Kate, Mum and Richard, had bought her a karaoke machine thing, which she brought down. Well, we had some fun with that. They set it up because it was the mums and dads that really grabbed that and wouldn't let go of it. I think they all thought they were big stars at singing and whatnot and dancing. It was really funny. Great times. Most all Christmases, we're a big family. We all get together, and touch wood, we all get on very, very well together. In our family, we've got quite a few sports people. We're quite sort of sporty types. They all support a football team called Arsenal. We never say anything bad about Arsenal. Especially Thierry Henry was one of my favourites, actually. And it all started really with their granddad, who was an Arsenal fan, I suppose being a Londoner. And John took that from there, and from then on, everybody born into this family have all become Arsenal supporters, otherwise I don't want to know them. I think we have got a Chelsea one somewhere around, but mostly Arsenal. I've had a very interesting life, a great life. Great, I'm so pleased I have 5 children. A lot of people didn't envy me at the time, but it's great, I think they envy me now. It's a great family. So I think, it's been good.